We got Nick Giffen here standing by to get into the Action Network Luck Rankings. Here is the explainer for those of you new to the show. The Luck Rankings allow our analysts to grade teams on what's called luck percentage, which is the difference between expected and actual win percentage. Unlucky teams are often undervalued week to week when there's a large luck disparity between them and their opponents. Okay, Nick's here on camera, but Nick, it went well for you last week. Let's roll the tape on what happened last Thursday.
I do like the over here in this one, especially if it ticks down to 29.5. But if it's at 30, still like the over.
I don't think you're right, and I don't want to think you're right because of this game. I can't watch this.
Why? But I want to know why.
It's like when you're in college and everyone sucks so bad that they have to put a curve. There's a curve on the grade at the end of the day. Oh, well, you know, with the curve, you actually get a B+ and it helps your resume and you can get into the school you want to get into. You're really going to put yourself through this.
Yeah, of course. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this one.
You think this over hits in like midway third quarter?
Yeah, I revised that to early fourth quarter. But somewhere in that range. Somewhere in that range. I don't want to get too hot takey, but
okay. Well, as it turns out, the over in Patriots-Steelers Thursday, that show was Wednesday night, the day before. That hit in the first half. So, Nick, your hunch was correct. Couple of clowns and Nick Giffen are part of our predictive analytics team. What do you have to say to us after a week has gone by?
Feel really good about that one, not gonna lie. But I did convince Tim to get on the over with me by the end of it. So, Tim, congratulations on hitting that bet.
Thank you. I did one of the most disgusting things possible last weekend. I teased the Patriots-Steelers over with the Army-Navy over. And I know we don't tease overs. We don't tease the college football, but they were both so low, and it was, a parlay for my weekend and, rooting for points and two pretty, hard to watch, four pretty hard to watch offenses. So, Nick, you convinced me. Hats off to you. You were right. I was wrong. But listen, you can't blame me because no one listens to their doctor, Nick. No one does.
That's true. But, we got another interesting spot this week, you guys. Thursday night football, once again, is a luck over. This one, of course, I know. This one, of course, between
I'm not saying a word.
The Los Angeles Chargers.
I'm listening,
and
doctor.
The Las Vegas Raiders. Right now, around 34.5. This actually opened a little bit higher than that, got pushed all the way down to 33, has since come back up to 34.5. But this has a luck total of plus 5.2. Don't need to remind you, except I will, that luck totals of plus 5 or more after week 11 are 34, 18, and 1 to the over. 65% over the last 6 years, including 4-1 to the over this year and 3-0 on prime time, including 2 Thursday night games, the other being a Monday night football game, and of course last week's victory lapping Thursday night football over. Over 75% of the tickets and the money have come in on the under so far. So just like last week, might be another chance to fade the public. If we look at each of these teams' last 3 games combined, they've averaged 8.8 points scored in each of their last 3, right? So 6 total games, 3 offensive games for Las Vegas, 3 for the Chargers. And defensively, they've allowed 16.3 points per game. That's in comparison to 13.3 expected to be scored offensively for these offenses. So a difference of 4.5 to that 8.8, and allowing 20.3. So a difference of 4 there to that 16.3. So that's 8.5 points below expectation per game combined for these teams over each of their last 3. So we're sitting in a spot where everybody's down on them because points have not been scored in these games involving these teams. But the expectation says at least more than a touchdown should have been scored in these games on average. We kind of replay them over and over and over again. So that's the reason, one of the reasons that this is a luck over. But we really need to talk about the quarterbacks in this one, because that's the big story, of course.
I'm glad you said it, Nick, because, I'm glad I'm so much Glash and I are closer to this Patriots thing. So last week, it's like, we kind of just like wanted them to suffer for, making us, have to watch them all year. But these quarterbacks, we have no connection to these quarterbacks. I guess.
And quickly, Nick, the other thing too is like, we know the book on Trubisky. We kind of knew the book on Zappy. He hasn't really had a fair shake to start, but he's been in the league a couple years. These two, Easton Stick and Aiden O'Connell, maybe the guy they do start. Now you're going to get into that, but there's a little more unknown here. You can admit that, right?
I mean, Aiden O'Connell and Bailey Zappi have probably played around the same amount. So
that's fair. That's
okay.
Yeah, it would really be Easton Stick, right?
Right.
But yeah, so Easton Stick at quarterback for the Chargers. Honestly, I don't think it really impacts the total here because the market's adjusted for it, right? I mean, if this game was Justin Herbert still, this would be closer, maybe not apt, but closer to 40 points. And so the fact that it's down at 34.5 or so is obviously a big adjustment there. So not too worried about that side of things. There's been an adjustment there. But on Las Vegas's side, just today, Antonio Pierce, head coach for the Raiders, said no decision's been made, but all three quarterbacks are in play. All three being, of course, Aiden O'Connell, potentially early season starter Jimmy Garoppolo, but also Brian Hoyer. And it sounds like they could be leaning towards Brian Hoyer, but that's why I'm not betting the over right now, because Brian Hoyer is terrible. He has a 4.45 adjusted net yards per attempt since his age 33 season, and he's 38 now, so he hasn't been good for a long time. Hoyer, we let's talk about Aiden O'Connell, right? Aiden O'Connell offenses averaged 15.5 points per game in his starts this year. Hoyer hasn't had a game where he both started and finished crack 15 points since October 8th of 2017. That's over 6 years ago. The last time Brian Hoyer started and finished a game that his team had at least 15 points. Now, there were 2 games he started that did crack 15 points, but in both of them, he got replaced for being absolutely terrible. One of them in New England, where Bailey Zappi replaced him, and
Green Bay
was scoring 24 points.
Green Bay. Yep. And that's when I think Hoyer got the concussion in that game. That's what happened to him. So
but he was terrible before that anyway.
I know he was.
And
It wasn't going well.
And then CJ Beathard replaced him in San Francisco. Again, when Hoyer was abysmal. And also San Francisco scored 24 points in that game, but it wasn't because of Brian Hoyer. Earlier this year, Aiden O'Connell replaced him in a game, and Hoyer led the Raiders to just 3 points. Aiden O'Connell, the Raiders offense scored 9 points in the final quarter there. So if you're getting outperformed by Aiden O'Connell, Bailey Zappi, and CJ Beathard, I don't know what that says. So that's why I'm not betting the over right now, because if Hoyer becomes a starter, this number should drop. And then if it drops enough to adjust, we can take the over. But there's no way I'm taking the over right now, and then Hoyer gets announced as the starter, and then it's like, darn. So just kind of have to wait the quarterback situation out on this one before we do anything.
So they matched up, these two teams, Chargers, Raiders, week 4. Herbert was the guy still. Total finished at 41, 24-17. If I remember correctly, go in the luck direction here. The Raiders had opportunities to score in this game, and Aiden O'Connell, being just a young buck out there, was turning the ball over and not making great decisions. So you'd think at this stage, if it's O'Connell and you got Easton Stick on the other side with some still pretty darn solid weapons there in Los Angeles, do you ever look at that at all? Do you look at when they play? I mean, it's week 4. I know there's not much to glean from that. I would not think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not reading into it too much. Not a single game, right? We want to look at the aggregate of all the games and,
sure,
adjusting for quarterbacks and things like that. But this is just a spot where over the course of the season, these two teams have combined to have totals lower than expected. So that's why this is a luck over.
Okay. And I'll just jump in and say, Nick, you obviously are, numbers based, right? That's how we do this. We try and take our emotions out of it, but it's pretty funny that it takes Brian Hoyer for you to look at your all the numbers, see what lights up, and say, actually, not so fast. It would take Brian Hoyer for you to have some trepidation. So, Brian Hoyer scares just about everybody. Okay, even when you try and take the emotion out of things. But
and the difference between last week and this week, we knew the quarterbacks going into that game, right? Not in terms of like we don't have a monster sample size on Bailey Zappi, but we knew he was going to be the starter. We knew Trubisky was going to be the starter. We don't yet know who's going to be the starter for the Raiders, which is why I can't take a position on this game yet.
Gotcha. But you do have some other ideas about some games on this board. What's next?
Yeah, let's go real quick away from the totals. Let's go to a luck matchup. We have the New York Giants against the New Orleans Saints. The Saints are the unlucky team in this matchup with a luck difference of 25 and a luck gap of 29.6%. Doesn't quite reach our 30% threshold to have some crazy splits here. So we're just going to have to go with the 24 place difference or more trends here. And, unlucky teams with luck difference of at least 24 places are 55, 37, and 4 against the spread. That's just under 60% over the last 6 years. However, if they're a home team, which the Saints are, it's just 27, 24, and 2, which is 52.8%. That barely covers a -110 on each side here. So we're not really betting this one. Super weak signal, especially knowing we look this past weekend and I know, Green Bay Packers were one of the on-notice teams. The Packers actually got lucky to only lose by 2. Our expected score had them losing.
I agree.
Even more than that. So the Giants were actually a little unlucky, and New Orleans was a bit lucky against Carolina. Should have been a little closer than expected. Not much. So you get a spot where the trends aren't really there, and the luck is not in our favor from a recency bias perspective. I'm just going to avoid New Orleans versus New York Giants in terms of luck being a deciding factor on which side to take here.
Okay, very good. And then you've got over the last 2 weeks on the Thursday night prime time, but 2 luck unders you've identified.
We got 3 luck unders, but
3.
sort of. Yeah, so the first one I do like, but
3.
The totals come down pretty far, and that's the New York Jets versus the Miami Dolphins. This game has a luck total of -6.9. Luck totals below -5, we say are luck unders, but especially this late in the year, if they're between -5 and -7, that's the sweet spot. These games are almost 65% to the under, 19, 10, and 1 to the under after week 11 over the last 6 years. And I think it's a good spot to maybe consider the under here as well. We have Zach Wilson, who's just coming off actually a very good game, which, we would expect maybe Zach Wilson to regress, I should say, to Zach Wilson's mean a little more. And Miami, of course, pretty banged up. I know Sean's going to talk about it in the On the Rock segment, but of course, Tyreek Hill banged up with the ankle injury, which could limit his mobility, big play ability, especially, which would impact the total. And then center Connor Williams out for the season with a knee injury is going to be a big impact. He's much better than their backup there. And we saw it right away. I mean, botched handoff, snap, whatever, botched snap and fumbled.
Exchange.
And then Tua picked it up. Yeah, exchange. And then Tua picked it up and fumbled it again. So, I definitely think that's going to be a big impact to this Miami offense as well. So impacting the Miami offense is going to have a lot more impact than impacting the Jets offense. So definitely think the under is in play here. Real quick, I'm going to rapid fire these last 2. We got 2 more luck unders. They kind of fit the same trend, but they're not really unders. And that's because both for Chicago versus Cleveland and Washington versus Los Angeles Rams, the other LA team, we have luck totals that are below -7.5. So Chicago, Cleveland, luck total of -8.2. Washington versus LA, luck total of -9. When we're this late into the season again, after week 11, if the luck total is below -7.5, we get almost a reverse signal where maybe these teams really are just putting up points and allowing points more than expectation, even more than we can have captured in our expected scores. The over when the luck total is below -7.5 is actually 21 and 13. That's over 60% to the over. So we might have a couple reverse trends here between Chicago and Cleveland and Washington and the LA Rams.
Can I ask you a quick question from the YouTube chat? Someone asked, can luck rankings be used on historical data? Like, can you rank the luckiest teams for the last 10 years?
Yes, absolutely. And we have that for at least the last 6 years. I remember we were saying earlier in the year, week 9, week 10, Pittsburgh was the luckiest team in the last 6 years after week 9 or after week 10. So yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
Well done. Glash, unless you have a follow-up, I have one more question. I'm sorry.
I'm good. I think I'm good. I feel good about this.
The idea that once it's beyond 7.5, you just kind of tip the cap. Is that so? Did you find that out like the hard way? Because if you were early in this, modeling process, it'd be like, hey, surefire. This is a big standard deviation.
Luckily, we
Let's
did
go with
not
this.
find it out the hard way.
Okay.
We created this. So we had the luck rankings last year, but that was our initial pass through. And then we revised them this off season to add more years worth of historical data and update the methodology. And before the year started, I wanted to make sure I looked at every possible trend I could. And I happened to notice that when it's this late in the season, and I was like, oh man, this late in the season, if it's like 9, 10, 11, negative 9, 10, 11, that's got to be crazy for the under. And so I plotted a graph of it, and it's like, yeah, if you go from -5, 6, 7, you're good. But then that like 7 to 7.5 range kind of plateaus. And then when you go beyond 7.5, it goes back to the over. So yeah, just kind of happened to notice the trend preseason, thankfully.
All right, I got one more for you. Did you like the clowns on our faces? Did you enjoy that?
Yes, I love that. In our Action Network Slack, I definitely had to put the two clowns and the nerd emoji face next to each other because
It's good.
That's what happened. Plus, the Patriots covered, right? That was a very strong luck trend as well. Last week was the Patriots covering. So no major super strong trends this week that I've played yet. I'm definitely interested in that Jets, Dolphins under. And am interested in this over once we know the quarterback situation.
Okay.
Nick, sorry, gosh, this guy's head's not going to fit through the door the way we've just gassed him up. The last segment here. I too much for me. I'm begging for mercy. I'm begging for mercy.
You're all right, Tim. You're all right. We recorded that Bad Beats video. You got it all out then.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, Nick. Thank you very much as always. Nick Giffen of our predictive analytics team. So
Anytime,
long,
guys.
friend.